right. Hey, class. This week I wanted to do a little bit of guided collaborative internet type of lecture. And so I invite you to, you can either watch my screen or maybe in another tab, maybe you want to check out some of these websites because one of my intentions is to help you start seeing, of course, you know how to do like Google searches and that, but the goal is um, to look at some different websites that maybe you've seen before, maybe you haven't. You might find them useful for this class. And in particular, as we're in our case study on Guatemala. Okay, so I invite you to follow along or write down these websites. So the first one is foreignassistance.gov. And at foreignassistance.gov, so I'm trying to focus on we're in the Guatemala unit right now, but of course you can look up other countries. And what's what's interesting here is that we can get some facts. We can get some quick facts, and they're pretty. This is a reliable website, so we can see how much has been obligated to them, which means how much has been said. They've been told that they will receive. So for the fiscal year 2021, this is the amount that 125 million, close to 126, and how much has already been spent of that? Not much, right? There's an overview of the country, its profile and its needs, and how it interacts with other organizations. So I think this is important. And if you want to read through this, I think this will help, with our current case study. Foreign assistance funding in Guatemala addresses critical development challenges, which are high levels of violence and insecurity, pervasive poverty and chronic malnutrition, and extreme vulnerability to the impacts of global climate change, as well as the impacts of these challenges on increased migration. U.S. assistance will focus on improving security, justice for citizens, and governance. Assistance also focuses on enhancing agriculture and other private sector sources of economic growth and food security in support of the President's Global Hunger and Food Security Initiative, Feed the Future, which aims to reduce chronic malnutrition. In addition, the U.S. assistance will provide access to health services and foster adoption of healthy behaviors at the household level, promote better educational outcomes, provide opportunities for out-of-school youth to decrease the desire to migrate, and improve natural resource management to mitigate the negative effects of global climate change. These are really noble goals, right? These activities will be provided through technical assistance, grants, and loans. So that's really important, right? Technical assistance, grants, and loans. Those are three different things: technical assistance, grants, and loans. Okay. By supporting targeted activities in these areas of intervention, U.S. assistance will also help address the underlying factors contributing to increased migration to the United States. So we see here the main goal for the U.S., right? Let's keep reading. The U.S. government launched the U.S. Strategy for Engagement in Central America, the strategy which complements the work undertaken by national governments and multilateral development banks. So that's like IMF. We'll talk about that in a second. To support the priority objectives identified in the Plan of the Alliance for Prosperity in the Northern Triangle, the strategy focuses on three overarching lines of action. 1. Promoting prosperity and regional economic integration. 2. Enhancing security through continued expanded Central America Regional Security Initiative activities, so it's military and policing. And 3. Promoting improved governance. Therefore, the Department of State and USAID's fiscal year 2017 request of $750 million in bilateral and regional assistance for Central America, part of the administration's $1 billion whole of government request for appropriations and financing assistance to support the strategy, includes and aligns the resources necessary to increase economic opportunity, reduce extreme violence, strengthen the effectiveness of state institutions, address climate change and food insecurity, and address challenges that have resulted in an influx of migration. I'm not gonna make comments on that, right? Yes, there's it should be obvious to you then that foreign assistance and partnerships are guided by political strategies and political, this is the political science that anthropology, of course, connects with as well. So there are political goals both on the U.S. side and other countries that, who are contributing in Guatemala and in the local Guatemala context. So, so yeah, politics matter. We can't really pretend that development and community work isn't influenced by political factors. It absolutely is. So we have to acknowledge it and talk about it. So over here on the sidebar, quick stats, gross domestic product actually really low, 78.5 billion. The annual population growth rate isn't that high. It's 1.95%. 2.1% is considered replacement growth rate. Why is it slightly more than 2%? Essentially because not everybody survives into adulthood. Per capita income, 4,549 a year. Okay, so give some perspective. About half the population, just slightly more than half of the population, is urban. So that's an increase. If we look at the trend, we'll see that Guatemala is one of these countries that is increasing in their urban population, which means people are leaving rural areas. And that has a lot of implications. When people leave rural areas for urban areas, there's a shift. So the rural areas then become desolate. There's no longer small farmers and things like that who grow food. The food that you see grown in Guatemala gets exported to the US. That's the carrots you eat, right? Literally. And other vegetables and things like that. You don't see them eating it there. That's produce for exportation. And it's grown under monocropping and things like that with lots of chemical inputs, which also are health risks for the people working there and living there. And then when they move into urban areas, poor infrastructure, lack of access to good jobs, things like that. So anyways, you can get the data and the full set of country data, really helpful. So this is really actually a useful site. We can look at the data. They will show you some data, and you could use these types of charts just so you know when you're writing a report, whether it's for my class or other classes. This is absolutely legitimate data for you to copy and cite and use, right? If you wanted to use a category. So let's see. Let's look at obligated for 2021. Well, let's look at 2020 was a crazy year. But so here we can see what I want to see is by category, right? So peace, health, and security was peace and security. The policing. It's actually a small category percentage, and we have these other sections. The multi-sector, that means integrated, like doing things that are both health and education or something like that. Economic development, so this is like business. These could be microloans, other things to try and get businesses going and things like that. Democracy, human rights, and governance. This is going to connect with things like overseeing elections, participation in elections, and policing as well. So, the ones that we want. Well, I mean, I guess we want all of this, but the things that we think about the most in the academic setting is often we'll talk a lot about like health sector spending. Well, that's 3.6. That's 5% of what was appropriated, right? And or obligated, and the environmental stuff 6%, education 12%. We're spending a lot of money, 27%, and 35% of what we give, a lot of it for business and for governance. And so, and I don't want to make waffling sort of accusations or statements, but with my many years, my decades of work in Mexico, and many years of work in Guatemala, when we see and people talk about rampant corruption in the system, you have to, you look at this and you have to be thinking about, wondering how much of this is funneled into hands that are corrupt. Like how does the money, something we always want to think about, how does the money go from putting money into schools down to actually like impacting a kid's life? All right. And the film talks about that too. This is, you can look at what applications for funding they get and how those are funded and who's getting that funding. So, and then they have an interactive map that will show you stuff too. So actually, I think this website, especially from our U.S. perspective, I think it's really interesting in that we should, use sources like this because it helps us understand funding from that's. This is mostly funding that's coming from the U.S. for the most part, not exclusively, depending on what filters you have. Okay, that's foreignassistance.gov. Let's go to the next website, USAID. USAID funnels money through partners, right? We're talking about partnerships. So and I should have said that about this organization. They're documenting, so the government will allocate funds, but then it'll be disseminated. It'll be like different agencies, whether they're Guatemalan agencies or NGOs or U.S. agencies that do work abroad, will apply for funding to realize those programs. So that's who does the on-the-ground work, right? And this is USAID. Look at what we do, right? You see the drop-down menu, the range of projects that they work on. And it should remind you of the sustainability goals, the sustainable development goals that we have. Talked about the millennium. We talked about how the millennium goals in 2015 were revamped and became the sustainable development goals for 2030. So a lot of kind of similar themes, right? We see a lot of the same themes. And this is, if you look down here, right, this is that idea of partnering. So you can, if you're with an organization, USAID will put out calls for grants, calls for proposals, and this is where you would get access to that information and work on things like that. So I encourage you to click around, right? Click around through websites like this. So this is definitely places that you may work or partner with in the future. So this is the U.S. side. Now let's look at United Nations level things. So WHO.int, WHO, World Health Organization. .int is for international. I think only the UN can use that address. So the World Health Organization is a great place to get information. So we come to the Americas. When you're doing country-specific or region-specific research, the World Health Organization is great. So the Pan American Health Organization is the directorate, is actually one of the oldest health organizations in the world. So we can come down to Guatemala. And this is where we gather statistics. So when you can go to other national statistic websites. Often you say, well, and if for a report, for example, if I said find out this information on Guatemala, you could go to the Guatemalan, National Service for Statistics and Census. You can do that. But this is also a very reliable website, and they will be an aggregator of those data. We can put it in English up here at the upper left. I think. No, it's only going to let us have it in Spanish. For Mexico, it comes in English, sorry. So anyways, for Guatemala, here's where we can find information and data. And so the statistics, I guess you'd have to be a little bit okay on your English. You can get a Google translator in there. But here's where we can come in for data and find out what's going on there. So you can get national level, you can do it down to the department level, which they call them departments instead of states or things like that. So this is a database, and you can get just kind of summary statistics, summary. You can come into the database, or they'll have like fact sheets that you can download as well, depending on what you need and what you're looking for. So here's like the database. And it's kind of cool because what if you said, well, I want to compare Chimaltenango, right, the place that we're really kind of focusing in on. I want to compare that with, San Cristobal in Chiapas, Mexico. Well, you can do that here. You can pull data and see, are they similar populations? How are they similar, different, etc. So World Health Organization, Pan American Health Organization, great websites for data and for initiatives. And then we talked about, when we talk about partnering, we talk about money a lot. And so a lot of the United Nations level money it comes from the World Bank and is overseen by the policies set in place with the International Monetary Fund. So the International Monetary Fund, I pulled this up. So you should look at these websites. I think sometimes maybe people get intimidated, think, oh, it's too technical. No, it's not. You can click around through here and find information here. So the International Monetary Fund are the institute. Well, it says right here, right? They are the ones who are responsible for the implementation, and World Bank is the actual lender who sends out the money. And so these are for long-term economic development and poverty reduction. So they work hand in hand. You can see here, that's their mandate. And the World Bank's mandate is to promote long-term economic development and poverty reduction by providing technical and financial support to help countries reform certain sectors or implement specific projects, such as building schools and health centers, providing water and electricity, fighting disease, and protecting the environment. World Bank assistance is generally long-term and is funded by both member country contributions and through bond issuance, meaning they sell bonds. World Bank staff are often specialists on particular issues, sectors, or techniques, but they cooperate within each other, and then they collaborate, here it is, closely on country assistance and policy issues that are relevant. So they work usually with NGOs that are local to the country, which is an important consideration. Like, how appropriate, say, if I started an NGO that was interested in, women, let's say women's health, and I'm doing work in Guatemala. Well, that's all well and good, but I might not necessarily, because my NGO is based in the U.S., I may not necessarily be a good candidate or be eligible for all of the grants and partnership programs, for good reasons. And so then we come to, this is USAID data. Sorry, I meant to show this. I had my slides out of order, my tabs. But let's see. So back to the World Bank, talking about that. So that's where BPD is the the organization that you guys are reading about in the book, the Glittenberg book. Let me see if I can pull it up. This is aldeaguatemala.org. Aldea is village in Spanish, ALDEA, Guatemala.org. And so this is here's the timeline. So actually, it's kind of complicated. So check it out. Understanding how NGOs work, because of the framework of international funding that they have to tap into, sometimes NGO organization can seem a little confusing. So this is what I want to kind of slowly start to unpack. One thing is BPD, now called Aldea Guatemala. They've kind of had a couple of name changes over the years. They have a really good website. So this might be, for your class project, this is the type of organization that maybe you want to do your research on, because they're big. They have a good website. You can get resources. You can get information, right? So it started in 1959 with Dr. Carol Burhorst. She went to Guatemala as a Lutheran medical missionary, and she goes to Antigua, right? She is with the Kachkel Maya, and that's in 1962. She founded the hospital there. Then we have, and so here gives the whole history, and you get a lot of this through the book, so I won't read it all to you, but I think it's interesting. And this is here, the name change I think happened around 2010-ish maybe, and here so they changed it. They became, BPD established a formal Guatemalan sister organization. So BPD was located, I think it's based out of, here it is. The Carol Burhorst Guatemalan Development Foundation becomes a provider for SIAS, the Rural Health Program, and BPD refocuses its work. So, where was it? There's somewhere in here where they say, so here it is, the U.S. based. Okay, in 1995, the Carol Burhorst Guatemalan Development Foundation approaches its goal of becoming a self-sustaining program, but its U.S. base becomes BPD, Berhurst Partners for Development. They're based out of Minnesota, actually. Okay, so that's where like their office is, and that's great, right? That's fine. But because of that, so they start a sister. So about 20 years later, 19 years later, they Asociación de Bienestar, Progreso y Desarrollo. So it changes a little bit. That's ABPD, right? To do the on the ground work in Guatemala. That's their sister organization, and that's an important thing. So I've helped establish these in Mexico, where you'll have one organization, a nonprofit in the U.S., which being a U.S. nonprofit, for example, allows people if people want to make a big donation, if they want to donate, $6,000 or something, great. Then they can make it a tax deduction because you're a nonprofit registered in the U.S. So there's a big reason to do that for fundraising. But then to be able to apply, well, there's logistical reasons. Obviously, it makes sense to have people on the ground in the country, but then also to have a local legal framework in Guatemala to receive funds, to get bank accounts open, to be eligible to apply for things like from the IMF or World Bank. It's important to have a sister organization in the country where the work will be performed. And so this isn't just Guatemala. This is actually pretty common. Like I say, I've been a part of setting these up in Mexico and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind with the way that partnerships and these organizations work, right? I mean, you can scroll down here and you can see like Aldea is a nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. So this is the sort of details that I'm hoping you'll learn about and start to unpack and explore so that you have a working knowledge of this coming out of this class. That's one of the things that I want us to accomplish. Another organization, BPD isn't, are they based in Minnesota? I can't remember. But this one is Common Hope. Common Hope is another one that when we go to Guatemala, we usually visit their schools and see what they're doing. And they have a 501c3, so a nonprofit based out of Minnesota, right? They're in like Eden Prairie or something, just outside of Minneapolis. And they do schools and health clinics and dental stuff. Really, really great programs that they do. But they have on the ground, and so they have actually a whole campus, like a whole campus school for kids there, and they work with other local schools and getting kids funding for schools and for meals and things like that to go in. They do a lot of really important programs. So this is another organization, just as an example. And they talk here. You can read through this, our story, our programs, what they do. Yeah, they're out of Minneapolis. So I wanted to point this out. So I've talked a lot about like big U.S. level funding and United Nations funding, which comes through IMF and World Bank. But of course, there are other levels of funding. For example, Rotary, and I'm a member of Rotary. A lot of you have gotten involved with Rotary right through our planned Guatemala trip, which was canceled. But and Rotary is just another great organization. So Rotary is a nonprofit. Members pay dues, and with those dues and other donations that Rotarians and others make, Rotary makes grants to organizations like Common Hope. They partner, right? They partner with groups like Common Hope or Aldea. These are just examples, right? Well, they can apply to Rotary and say, well, we're doing this project where we're going to give, 50 kids in this rural village school fees and meal supplementation and X, Y, and Z, right? And school bus rides to school or whatever, whatever it is that they're doing. And they can get grants. So partnerships become really, really important in terms of humanitarian aid and development. And I just think it's so cool to see Aldea, this amazing, and when we go to Guatemala, when we're able to go, this is the organization that we meet with and we work with to build stoves in the villages. And so you can look at their partner communities and these, let's see, we take students here to Palama, for example. I'm back at the Aldea website. And these are places where you can get some stats, some numbers on what they're doing. And they're just doing a lot of different things. You can see the different programs that they're working on. We put in the stoves. So when we go with Rotary, we do efficient vented stoves, and we get Rotary grant money to do that. We pay our own travel, right? And then we get grant money to help pay for the cost of the stoves and the people there. I mean, they're not entirely free. The people there have to save up what for them is an incredible amount of money, right? They take months, sometimes a year, to save up that money to get the stove. So it's a really big deal. These are life-changing things. A lot of these programs. So, yeah. So this is what I wanted to go over. Sorry, I'd skipped that one tab on USAID data, but so here's the data on the country at a glance. You can see Guatemala, how they rank in terms of how poor they are. I mean, Guatemala is a very poor country, and it's growing in urbanity. It's becoming more and more urban. So, anyways, these are some of the things that you guys will be looking into, and I hope that you let your curiosity take you deeper into, checking out NGOs and yeah, I mean, go ahead and imagine what you might bring to the table. Because for a lot of you, someday you might be working with one of these groups. That'd be really cool. So that is this week's discussion on partnerships and how those go between institutions, because that's really what they are.